Hello, and welcome. Welcome once again to the Secrets of the High Demand Coach podcast. And I am here with yet another high demand coach, and that is the one and only Patti Mara. She's spent the last 20 years helping companies and individuals to take a fresh look at the way people operate. This unique insight helps them to reach their full potential, enhancing customer experiences and dramatically increasing their growth, customer retention, and profit. Now, in her coaching business, Patty's always looking for what she calls the shifting point. It's that one piece of the puzzle that opens up a new level of results. She's also the author of UpSolutions, turning your team into heroes and customers into raving fans. And she's also the creator of UpSolutions Team Success Training and the Business Accelerator Blueprint. And Patti, I am so excited to have you here on the show. And what I'd like to do before we get into, because there's so much in here that we can unpack, and I'm excited about our conversation, but I'd love to just take a couple steps back to start. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing before you were coaching and consulting and how you ultimately decided to make the leap.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Scott. Pleasure to be on your Secrets of the High Demand Coach podcast. So it's an interesting piece. When I started to figure out what next, and the obvious evolution was coaching. When I actually reflected back, pretty much everything I did, regardless of what I did, was I coached. When I held a sales position, my method of selling was to anyone who would talk to me, I'd find out about their business and what were their, leverage points and what were their constriction points, and I would coach them. And when they saw value, they would buy what I was selling. So it's an interesting piece. What got me down the path of customer experience was working in a small bookstore, chain bookstore, when I was going through university. And I had a really great manager. And she taught all of us that whenever somebody came in the store, we stopped what we were doing. We found if they were looking for something, we took them to the section, put the book in their hand. If we didn't have it, we made alternatives or we tried to order it in. And just fully focused. When customers were in the store, they were our total focus. There was no sidebar conversations. So an interesting piece of that was, and what stayed with me, first of all, it was fun. Mostly students as team members, and we had almost no turnover. And at the end of the year, we doubled our gross revenue.
Wow.
So profitable.
Yeah.
Right. So anyways, it stayed with me. And that was in the late 80s. And that really stayed with me. So, trying to figure out where I fit in my 30s. And I came across an organization called Strategic Coach. And I hadn't even recognized that I was coaching until I was in a structured coach program.
Right.
And then everything took off from there.
Amazing. So one of the things that fascinated me by your bio, and as I was looking through your site and LinkedIn and everything, was your kind of dual focus, if you will, on customer experience, external facing, and teamwork, internal facing, which, in the industry, lots of times you'll have customer experience folks and you'll have kind of organizational design or leadership management. But very few people tie those two together, which, especially in the world of small business, is absolutely essential. And again, when you have these large businesses that become so focused on themselves, it becomes a really, really big deal again. How do we get focused back on the customers? So we heard little bits and pieces of this, but why is it that you're that there's such a heavy conviction that you have to drive both?
Yes. So it's a really important point, Scott. So thank you for focusing on it. For me, it's hand in glove or bookends. I only work with entrepreneurial businesses. I actually describe myself as a passionate advocate for locally owned businesses, right? I believe a thriving local businesses is a thriving community. And most of them don't realize that what they sell isn't their business. It's just a vehicle for creating value, and the value is your business. So that really was my starting point. It's like for business owners to really understand where the power was, what differentiated them, why people chose them, what that was, and defining that. But as soon as you do that, you have to engage the team, because your team are the ones delivering the experience. Is it an aligned experience to the value, or does it take away from the value? Does it end up if you define and start communicating why choose your business, and then your team doesn't deliver an aligned experience, then, you're back to being commoditized. You completely negate. You're back to being judged just on what you sell. So the team focus, and there are just a couple layers with that. A lot of businesses, first of all owners tend to be good at whatever their business is. And what was it? The E-myth, well, I'm going to say, the E-myth with building structure around you when you're good at whatever the business is. And then strategic coach in the book, Who Not How, with having the right people in place, right? You have to have the right people in place, but then they need to be set up to win. And what I found is that when you create an environment for the team to win, when they tap into the purpose of their role, in other words, they get to show up every day and have an impact. Purpose-led passion really is what you're tapping into. Yeah. It's like you wake up this incredibly productive machine that's engaged, that's committed, that shows up to make a difference, that works well with each other, that creates great experiences, that engages the customer. And that, for me, I think it's the most important profit center in a business. And focusing on that, it ties into, you have to communicate the value up front. You have to differentiate your business, but that piece becomes this engine in a business. Yeah. And that, for me, that's just fun. It's playful. It's fun. It's engaging. It's rewarding. It turns everything on its head.
Yeah. So I love that you've kept using this word again and again, and I believe intentionally, but like, we actually call the stage that most of these businesses function in fun. It's actually the name of the stage is very, very technical term, I know, but you get it up off the ground, right? We call that early struggle. You get out of early struggle and you're in the second stage called fun. And that's where, most kind of locally owned businesses should actually stay, right? There's not necessarily a need to scale up into some massive thing. Sure, that's wonderful. And it's a lot of fun in its own way. But there's something really special about that fun stage, about the relative simplicity of it. What I've found, though, is that most owners, especially founders, don't recognize the fun stage until they've left it. Right. One of the main things we get, because I do a lot of work in the next stage, which is called whitewater, not fun. Right. And we actually realized the guy who was creating the model, my business partner, now realized he struggled for the longest time to name the fun stage. Right. He's like, what is it? Organic growth? No, that's kind of boring. Is it, what is it? And he realized no one comes and says, I'm in the fun stage. What they do is they come in whitewater and say, it's not fun anymore. And so what I love about your approach to it is you've had the experience of being in a fun environment, right? And you caught how special that is. It's not just about the profit and everything. It's about genuinely structuring an organization that can have fun, because that's actually the best way to drive profit in that fun stage. So I love that. Now, the challenge with it, though, like I mentioned, is that most folks don't realize they're in fun, right? Not until it's gone. They're so concerned about all of the challenges because it's not easy, right? There's so many things going on, especially for a founder. They're doing the work, right, to an extent, while they're also trying to get a team moving in the same direction. And that can be a challenge, right? So how do you help folks? The biggest thing is I just don't have time for this, right? And also, like, what's wrong with these people is a big question that they're asking, right? So how do you help them to take those first couple of steps in the direction of moving toward an aligned team around an aligned, customer promise? How do you get that snowball rolling?
Yes, perfect. And you said something, Scott, I don't have time for this. So an interesting piece of the puzzle is I talk about setting your team up to win, and I believe there are 4 pillars of team success. And I'll go through them quickly because they're not complicated, but each of the 4 pillars are time generators. So it takes effort to put them in place. However, when you have them in place, your team's working together. You're not dealing with issue after issue after issue. What's the rule of thumb? You want to systematize the routine so you can humanize the exception. So we
I love
need
that.
this, the four pillars is that team structure. So the first pillar is understanding the why of your business, right? The communicating the value, why choose
Yeah.
you. And your team needs to understand what that is because they're the ones delivering that. The second pillar are position agreements. That's beyond job descriptions. Job descriptions usually identify the tasks in a role. A position agreement identifies the task, but what's the standards of success?
Yeah.
What's the outcome and how does this role contribute to the overall success of the business? So you want to identify results, not just tasks.
Right.
The third, and your team's already doing it. So it's not like you have to recreate the wheel. It's a minute of capturing what your team's doing. The third pillar is team communication. And it's a fundamental. If you do not have some level of basic communication in place, your team's making it up. And most of the time they're making it up wrong. And you're frustrated and they're frustrated and they don't feel in the loop.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So basic communication, once a week huddle, could be daily, but at least once a week huddle, maybe once a week, an hour long training, twice a year, a retreat. But the very basic is a weekly huddle. The fourth pillar is regular feedback. So not just what's not working, but also what is working. And the
Right.
rule of thumb is 5-1, right? 5-1, acknowledging wherever we put our attention, that's what expands.
Yeah.
So we want to reinforce what is working while also dealing with what's not working. And a key piece with this, one of the things I hear this a lot actually at the moment, is we just can't find good people. So all of a sudden, I'm seeing business owners not hold their team accountable, not put the structure in place, afraid to rock the boat because they don't want to lose who they have because it's hard to hire someone new.
Yeah.
And the problem with that, it's actually causing what you don't want. What's his name now? Scott. There's a really, really good book, and I'll see if it comes to me. He qualifies A players, B players, C players. A players show up and you just let them loose and they're going to produce results. Almost like give them the structure, give them the context and let them go. B players produce results, but you have to manage them. And C players are disengaged, actively or passively. They're disengaged. Maybe they're the wrong fit in the wrong role, but they're disengaged. So the challenge is if you don't create an environment for A players to win, they will leave.
Right.
They will not, your best team members will not stay in an environment that they cannot win. So if you talking about time generators, it's like this vicious wheel. And of course the owner's frustrated, and of course the team's frustrated.
Right. So and there's so much in there. Changing personnel is it seems like one of the obvious choices, right? But it tends to be one of the harder ones as well. So and to your point, you can swap everybody out, but if you swap in all A players and you haven't built an environment for them to thrive, it's not going to help much. So going back to this idea of how do we start getting some momentum in this? Do you work those four pillars in that order, or how do you do that with a client?
Not necessarily. They don't have to be in order.
Mm-hmm.
There's a flow to the four pillars, 1 through 4. But really, my first thing, if I was to start anywhere, would be having weekly huddles. If a company aren't having at a minimum a weekly huddle, I would start there. Now, saying that, there are some businesses that we started with getting clarity in position agreements first. But the low hanging fruit are the weekly huddles. And I'm talking 15, 20 minutes. Everyone reports on what they accomplished last week. They talk about what the key focus is this week. Everyone says what they're going to accomplish this week that they're going to report on the next week. Basic structure, but that alone will shift the culture in the company.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. All right. So, and there's so many different routes to running this, but there's a question that I like to ask all of my guests, and I don't want to miss it with you. I'm excited to hear what you have to say, and it's this: what's the one thing, the biggest secret that you wish wasn't a secret at all? What's that one thing that you wish everybody listening today knew?
That your team is the most important profit driver in your business.
Wow.
You have to invest in your team. You could say that it's the owner's responsibility to create a thriving, growing, profitable business. And part of that is creating an environment, the culture that the team get to win. And
Mm.
if you do that, it's like you unlock productivity and profit in your business. Let them go.
Yeah. Yeah. And just for a second, because I know, and I've been there a couple of times, but like when you're down in it, right? You're in just that, like you're out of time. You've hired a bunch of people. You don't necessarily know how to manage them well. You feel like you're out over your skis. It's exhausting, right? You just wake up every day exhausted. So paint us a little bit of a picture, maybe even a story from a client where you met them there, right? You helped them get these four pillars in place. What does life look like on the other side of that?
Absolutely. Well, that, you talked about fun. I talk about freedom, right? So the other side of that, it's literally, and Scott, you kind of talked about this if an entrepreneur has started their business, they went through that scrapping phase. It's like just figuring out what the model was, what they were selling, building a team, building a marketplace, and figuring out how it actually works. The design is one thing, the practical is another.
Right.
So you go through that scrapping phase, and it's kind of like you have to be a rugged individual, right? You have to get things done. But when you go to the next phase, which is developing your team, which is putting that infrastructure in place, which is the who, not how, which is, creating an environment for them to win. The other side of that is freedom.
Mm.
So all of a sudden, an owner or an entrepreneur can spend time in growing the business. And often that's what they're passionate about, what they love to do. Problem solving, figuring out what next. But you can only do that when you've really created an environment for your team to thrive.
That's so true. That is so true. So good. Next question here. I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit, and then love to hear. I know that this is resonating with some folks, and they're like, "I have to know more." So we'll help folks find out how to get with you in just a moment. But before we get there, I'm going to have you take off your coach, consultant, advisor hat, put on your CEO hat of your own, if you will, and talk to us a little bit about what the next stage of growth looks like for you in your business, and what challenge or challenges you think you'll have to overcome to get there.
Perfect. Well, Scott, to answer that, I'll go back because I live just outside of Toronto, Canada, and going through the last several years, we went through almost 2 years of lockdown. I had to completely rejig my business model because what I used to do before was, in fact, my main target audience are independent pharmacy owners. And so I used to travel and do on-sites, and I couldn't do that. So that had me create this online program that I do a combination of live coaching and a 3-month, weekly training. That's it's all captured and just delivered in a drip. And so and yet that took off well beyond what I expected it to. So all of a sudden, awesome. It's just exploded, and we have an app coming out. So Pharmacy Success is our new app coming out, and we'll have a free 4 pillars training in the app. It's so we're quite excited about that. So that's our next piece, is a little bit harnessing technology, going beyond the current market, and expanding and seeing what I like to say. I launched what I thought would be successful, and then I paid attention to what people wanted more of. And so we're going in that. So I've got some coaches being developed within our organization. So we're in the scale. We're very much in the scale phase, and having fun with it.
How exciting. How exciting. Very cool. All right. So again, I know there's some folks listening to this right now, and they're like, yes, yes, and yes. They're in that place of, they're exhausted, they're worn out, but they know that it can be better, and they just resonating with what you had to say. How can they find out more about what you do in your business?
Perfect. Thank you, Scott. So my website is pattimara.com, and we've created a special page, a resource page that actually is a tool that people can download called the Touchpoint Scorecard, and a short training on how to use it. It's a way for your team to start looking from your customer's perspective. And that is pattimara.com/secrets for secrets of a high demand coach. And then there is actually we were just basically developing the website right now, but pharmacysuccess.com. And on that page, you can actually download the 4 Pillars ebook.
Amazing. Amazing. So Patti Mara, that's PattiMara.com/secrets, and Pharmacy Success, was it .com?
Yes.
I love it. So head on over there, grab some of those resources. I had a chance to check out Patti's site earlier, and it's just full of fantastic information. You will not be disappointed. Well, Patti, thank you so much for being on the show. It was an absolute pleasure having you here. And for everyone listening today, your time and attention mean the world to us. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did, and I cannot wait to see you next time. Take care.